Jacob's epic journey, a saga of faith, deception, and redemption, resonates across millennia, a testament to a world where cunning often overshadows integrity. Jacob's life forces a confrontation with uncomfortable truths about human nature and the seemingly paradoxical nature of God's plan. Have you ever considered how a God of perfect justice can utilize flawed individuals to accomplish his divine purposes? Prepare yourself for a narrative that will challenge your preconceived notions of justice and mercy as we delve into the astonishing origins of a chosen nation. Genesis 25 verse 21 introduces us to a couple grappling with profound distress. Isaac, in fervent prayer, beseeches the Lord on behalf of his barren wife. The Lord answers his plea, and Rebekah conceives. In ancient times, barrenness was often interpreted as a divine curse, a heavy burden Rebekah carried for 2 decades. Imagine the despair that must have consumed their hearts, the weight of an unfulfilled promise made to Abraham, coupled with the agonizing inability to conceive a child. God's answer to Isaac's fervent prayers, however, arrives intertwined with unforeseen complications. Genesis 25 verses 22 to 23 unveils the internal conflict within Rebekah's womb. The babies jostled violently within her, prompting the anguished question, "Why is this happening to me?" Seeking divine guidance, she inquires of the Lord. The Lord's response, "2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." Rebekah's pregnancy becomes a premonition of the conflict that would define not only the lives of her sons, but the destinies of entire nations. This divine prophecy subverts the established order. The older son would serve the younger, a decree established even before birth. God, from the very outset, lays down a pattern that directly challenges deeply ingrained human conventions. Genesis 25 verses 24 to 26 chronicles the dramatic birth of the twins. Rebekah gives birth to 2 sons. The first emerges, his skin the color of red, his entire body covered in a thick, hair-like garment. They name him Esau. His brother follows, his hand gripping Esau's heel, a symbolic gesture that foreshadows his future. He is named Jacob. Isaac is 60 years old at the time of their birth. The contrast between the twins is stark from the very beginning. Esau, the firstborn, possesses the reddish, hairy characteristics that would later come to embody his rugged, impulsive nature. Jacob, conversely, enters the world grasping his brother's heel, a symbolic action that prophetically mirrors his cunning and determined personality. As the boys mature, their contrasting personalities become even more pronounced. Genesis 25 verses 27 to 28 describes their divergent paths. Esau, a skilled hunter, thrives in the open country. Jacob, conversely, finds contentment in the domesticity of their home. Isaac, with his fondness for wild game, develops a strong affection for Esau. Rebekah, however, favors Jacob. Esau embodies the idealized masculine figure of the era man of the field, skilled in hunting and comfortable with the rugged wilderness. Jacob, on the other hand, remains quiet and domestic, preferring the familiar comforts of home. This fundamental difference in personality is mirrored in their parents' affections, with Isaac favoring Esau and Rebekah showing a clear preference for Jacob. This parental favoritism plants the seeds of discord that will later flourish into open, conflicted, timeless parable, illustrating the dangers of unequal treatment amongst siblings. The turning point in their youth arrives with a seemingly insignificant Eventan incident that, nonetheless, carries profound consequences. Genesis 25 verses 29 to 34 recounts a pivotal moment. Jacob prepares a pot of stew. Esau, returning famished from the hunt, pleads with Jacob for a portion. "Quick," he demands, "let me have some of that red stew. I am famished." Jacob counters with a proposition. First sell me your birthright." Esau, in his hunger and impulsiveness, readily agrees. The birthright, in patriarchal society, represents not just material inheritance but spiritual blessing and leadership. Esau's rash decision highlights his impulsive nature and his tendency towards instant gratification. Jacob, in contrast, displays calculated shrewdness, seizing an opportunity and exploiting his brother's weakness for his own gain. While his actions may seem morally questionable by modern standards, they reveal a sharp understanding of the value of the birthright and a ruthless determination to secure it. This exchange of the birthright for a simple meal becomes a potent symbol of Esau's recklessness and Jacob's opportunistic nature. The biblical text refrains from offering explicit moral judgment at this juncture, but the unfolding narrative will showcase how this single decision irrevocably shapes the destinies of both brothers and their descendants. The implications of this seemingly trivial act run far deeper than the mere transfer of material possessions. The birthright carries with it spiritual blessings and the weighty responsibility of familial leadership. Esau's casual disregard for his birthright demonstrates a profound lack of foresight and an alarming lack of appreciation for the divine promises made to his ancestors. For Jacob, the acquisition of the birthright marks merely the first step in his quest to inherit the promises made by God. Although his methods remain questionable, his unshakable determination to secure these divine blessings becomes a recurring motif throughout his life. This pivotal event sets the stage for the future events that will shape Jacob's life. His cunning and unwavering determination will propel him to great heights but will also repeatedly thrust him into situations fraught with conflict and peril. Jacob's story serves as a poignant reminder that even our flaws and imperfections can be utilized by God to fulfill his grander designs. Genesis 27 verses 1 to 14 transports us to a critical moment in Isaac's life. Advanced in age and nearly blind, Isaac summons his elder son, Esau. "My son," he calls. "Yes, father," Esau responds. Isaac reveals his impending mortality and his desire to bestow his blessing upon his firstborn son before his death. He instructs Esau to hunt game and prepare a meal, so that he might offer a blessing. Isaac's failing eyesight and advanced age create a sense of urgency and vulnerability. Aware of his approaching death, he feels compelled to fulfill his patriarchal duty of blessing his firstborn before departing this world. The blessing, far from being a mere formality, holds prophetic weight, a powerful act capable of determining the destiny of the recipient and their descendants. Isaac's intention to bless Esau underscores his persistent preference for his elder son, even years after the birthright transaction. It's possible that Isaac remained unaware of the agreement between the brothers, or perhaps deemed it invalid. Regardless of the reason, his decision to bless Esau inadvertently triggers a chain of events that would forever alter the course of his family's history. Genesis 27 verses 5 to 10 introduces Rebekah's calculated strategy to favor Jacob. Overhearing Isaac's instructions to Esau, Rebekah devises a plan to secure the blessing for her favored son, Jacob. She directs Jacob to obtain 2 choice young goats, instructing him to prepare a meal for his father, a meal that will be used as a vehicle to secure the blessing. Rebekah's plan is both audacious and risky. She not only contravenes her husband's wishes, but also places her favored son in a precarious position. Her actions reveal a complex web of motivations: a desire to see the prophecy of the older serving the younger fulfilled, her strong preference for Jacob, and possibly a conviction that Jacob possesses the qualities necessary to lead the family. The preparation of the stew is merely the first step in a carefully orchestrated plan of deception. Genesis 27 verses 11 to 17 details Jacob's elaborate disguise. Jacob expresses his reservations, fearing exposure due to his smooth skin, which contrasts sharply with Esau's hairy physique. Rebekah, displaying unwavering determination, assures Jacob that she will bear the burden of any resulting curse. The elaborate disguise, involving Esau's clothes and goat skins, reveals the lengths to which mother and son are willing to go to deceive Isaac. Jacob's initial hesitation arises not from moral scruples, but from a pragmatic fear of being discovered. Rebekah's willingness to accept the potential consequences demonstrates her unwavering commitment to the success of her plan. Jacob's encounter with Isaac is narrated in Genesis 27 verses 18 to 29, a scene thick with palpable tension. Jacob, disguised as Esau, presents the prepared meal to his father. Isaac, suspicious despite the familiar scent, insists on touching Jacob to verify his identity. This pivotal moment is filled with suspense. Jacob repeatedly resorts to deception, even invoking God's name to bolster his fraudulent claim. Isaac's suspicion leads him to demand physical confirmation. The tactile sense, often deemed more reliable than hearing, becomes the decisive factor in resolving his uncertainty. Genesis 27 verses 22 to 23 reveals the outcome of the test. Isaac, feeling the hairy hands of Jacob, disguised with goat skins, concludes that the voice is indeed Jacob's, but attributes the hairy touch to the roughness of his elder son's hands. Mistaking Jacob for Esau through his tactile examination, Isaac proceeds with the blessing. The blessing bestowed upon Jacob, as recorded in Genesis 27 verses 27 to 29, is profound and comprehensive. The imagery is potent. The promises of material prosperity, political dominance, and a unique spiritual status are all interwoven. Ironically, the blessing includes dominion over his birthright, a direct echo of the prophecy uttered before the twins were even born. Esau's return and the revelation of the deception unfold with dramatic intensity in Genesis 27 verses 30 to 35. Upon his return from hunting, Esau prepares his own meal and seeks his father's blessing. Isaac's reaction, trembling violently, reveals the shock and horror of discovering the deception. His declaration, "And indeed he will be blessed," signifies his understanding that the blessing, once spoken, remains irrevocable. It is a prophetic pronouncement, not a mere paternal wish. Esau's anguished cry is palpable. His despair is profound. Genesis 27 verses 36 to 38 captures Esau's profound grief and anguish. His accusations towards Jacob are sharp, highlighting the repeated betrayals he has suffered. He pleads for a blessing, any blessing, showcasing his belated realization of the value of what he has lost. Isaac, in response, offers Esau a secondary blessing. Genesis 27 verses 39 to 40 details Isaac's blessing upon Esau. In contrast to Jacob's blessing, Esau's blessing foretells a life of struggle, punctuated by eventual liberation from Jacob's rule. Genesis 27 verse 41 describes Esau's vengeful plot against his brother. Consuming with rage over the blessing given to Jacob, Esau vows revenge. The imminent threat against Jacob's life creates a sense of urgency and danger. Genesis 27 verses 42 to 45 outlines Rebekah's plan for Jacob's escape. Rebekah, having learned of Esau's murderous intent, devises a plan to ensure Jacob's safety and the continuation of the promised lineage. Her actions display her cunning and strategic thinking. Genesis 28 verses 1 to 5 details Jacob's departure to Haran. Isaac, despite the deception, blesses Jacob again and provides specific instructions about marriage, emphasizing the importance of maintaining the family's lineage. Genesis 28 verses 10 to 11 marks the beginning of Jacob's journey toward Haran. Jacob's solitary journey to Haran is highlighted. The imagery of his vulnerability and isolation is powerful. Genesis 28 verses 12 to 15 describes Jacob's famous dream at Bethel. The dream, featuring a stairway connecting heaven and earth, is a powerful vision that reveals the divine connection and God's continuous presence in Jacob's life. Genesis 28 verses 16 to 22 details Jacob's response to the dream. Jacob's vow marks the beginning of a deeply personal relationship with God. Genesis 29 verses 1 to 12 narrates Jacob's arrival in Haran and his encounter with Rachel. The encounter at the well echoes similar meetings in Jacob's family history. Jacob's actions, demonstrating strength and eagerness to impress Rachel, are highlighted. Genesis 29 verses 13 to 14 describes the warm reunion between Jacob and Laban. Genesis 29 verses 15 to 20 recounts Laban's proposal of a work agreement with Jacob. The 7-year agreement reflects Jacob's love for Rachel and Laban's shrewdness. Genesis 29 verses 21 to 25 narrates the deceptive marriage of Jacob and Leah. The deception highlights the irony of Jacob's situation and the complex dynamics of the characters involved. "This is what you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" The sheer irony of this situation is staggering. Jacob, who deceived his blind father, is now himself deceived in the darkness of his wedding night. Jacob's anguished question, "Why have you deceived me?" echoes the very question Esau must have posed to him years earlier. Laban's response, and the subsequent second agreement, are meticulously detailed in Genesis 29 verses 26 to 30. Laban replied, "It is not our custom to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week. Then we will give you the younger one in return for another 7 years of work." And Jacob, ever the driven bargainer, agreed. He completed the week with Leah, and then, finally, Laban gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. Laban further provided his servant Bilhah to Rachel as an attendant. Jacob, now married to both sisters, consummated his union with Rachel as well, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, a preference that deepened the already simmering tensions within this unconventional family unit. His love for Rachel mirrored the favoritism his own parents had shown him, creating a cyclical pattern of family conflict, a pattern he unwittingly perpetuated. This preference, this imbalance, would cast a long shadow over the coming years. Jacob's children were born amidst this volatile atmosphere of rivalry, a situation documented in Genesis 29 verses 31 to 35 and 31:24. Leah bore Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Rachel, initially unable to conceive, gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob, resulting in the births of Dan and Naphtali. Leah, observing her own diminished fertility, similarly offered her servant Zilpah to Jacob, who fathered Gad and Asher. Later, Leah conceived again, giving birth to Issachar and Zebulun. Finally, Rachel conceived and gave birth to Joseph. This narrative of births pulsates with the tension and competition between the sisters, each vying for Jacob's favor, a favoritism that could be expressed only through motherhood. The very names given to the children often mirrored their mother's hopes, fears, and emotional turmoil. These years in Haran transformed Jacob from a young, unburdened bachelor into the head of a large, multifaceted, and inherently complex family. Through deceit, arduous labor, and relentless family rivalries, Jacob began to reap the consequences of his past actions, a harvest sown in the fields of his own making. Yet, woven within this tapestry of hardship, we witness the gradual unfolding of God's promise to make him a great nation. Genesis 30 verses 22 to 28 marks the genesis of Jacob's growing desire to return to his homeland. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away, that I may go to my own country and to my kindred. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served you, and let me go, for you know my service that I have given you." But Laban, shrewd and calculating, was not ready to relinquish his most valuable asset. He responded, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." He then added, "Name your wages, and I will pay them." This passage reveals a power struggle, The tension between Jacob's longing for home and Laban's desire to retain the prosperity Jacob brought. Jacob's remarkable success as a shepherd is detailed in Genesis 30 verses 29 to 43. He proposed a seemingly disadvantageous deal to Laban who would take only the speckled and spotted animals from the flock. However, through a combination of careful selective breeding and what may well have been divine intervention, Jacob dramatically increased his wealth, a testament to his resourcefulness and cunning. Genesis 31 verses 1 to 3 describes the growing resentment among Laban's sons and God's clear directive for Jacob's departure. Jacob overheard Laban's sons complaining, "Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and of our fathers he has gotten all this wealth." Laban's attitude towards Jacob also changed, solidifying Jacob's sense of unease and prompting God's direct command. "Return to the land of your ancestors and to your kindred, and I will be with you." The clandestine planning of their escape is narrated in Genesis 31 verses 4 to 13. Jacob revealed his dream to Rachel and Leah, a divine instruction to leave. Jacob's wives, fully aware of their father's unjust treatment, fully supported his decision to flee. Genesis 31 verses 17 to 21 depicts the dramatic escape during the sheep shearing. Jacob loaded his children and wives onto camels, driving all his livestock and accumulated possessions from Padan Aram, setting his sights on his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. In a cunning move, Rachel, before Laban could stop them, stole her father's household gods. Jacob, similarly deceptive, fled without informing Laban, crossing the Euphrates and heading towards the hill country of Gilead. Rachel's theft added a layer of complexity to their flight, perhaps signifying her reluctance to completely sever ties with her family. The pursuit by Laban is recounted in Genesis 31 verses 22 to 24. 3 days later, Laban learned of Jacob's escape and pursued him for 7 days, finally catching up with him in the hill country of Gilead. God, ever watchful over Jacob, appeared to Laban in a dream, warning him against harming Jacob, even amidst Jacob's morally questionable actions. This divine intervention underscores God's continued protection of Jacob, regardless of his flaws. The confrontation on Mount Gilead is detailed in Genesis 31 verses 26 to 42. Laban accused Jacob of stealing his household gods, unaware of Rachel's secret act. Rachel, cleverly seated upon the gods, deceived her father by claiming she was menstruating, thus preventing a search of her person. Jacob then launched into a passionate defense, detailing the injustices he'd suffered under Laban's employ. 20 years have I been with you. Your ewes and your she-goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn of beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. You did require it of my hand. By day the heat consumed me, and by night the frost, and my sleep fled from my eyes. Thus I have been 20 years in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you changed my wages 10 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac, had been with me, surely you would have sent me away now empty. God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you. This powerful, emotional speech speaks to the profound sense of injustice that Jacob felt, coupled with an unwavering belief in God's intervention on his behalf. The covenant between Jacob and Laban is established in Genesis 31 verses 43 to 55. They erected a heap of stones as a witness to their agreement not to harm each other. Laban named the heap Jegar Sahadutha, Aramaic for heap of witness, while Jacob called it Galeed, Hebrew for heap of witness. Their final separation is marked by Genesis 31 verse 55. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and daughters, blessed them, and departed for home, This farewell concludes a pivotal chapter in Jacob's life, marking his transition from a young man to the patriarch of a large and prosperous family. The encounter with angels at Mahanaim is briefly mentioned in Genesis 32 verses 1-2. Jacob encountered the angels of God, naming the place Mahanaim, 2 camps, a divine reassurance of God's continued presence and protection, preparing him for the challenging reunion with Esau. Genesis 32 verses 3-21 details Jacob's preparation for his dreaded meeting with Esau. He sent messengers ahead to inform Esau of his arrival. Upon their return with news that Esau was approaching with 400 men, Jacob was overcome with fear. He divided his group into 2 camps, reasoning that if Esau attacked one, the other might escape. He then prayed fervently to God, "O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord, who saidst unto me, Return unto thy country, and to thy kindred, and I will do thee good. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies, and of all the truth, which thou hast shewed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become 2 bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered." This prayer reveals the inner turmoil of fear and faith, acknowledging his unworthiness while reminding God of his promises. Jacob also prepared a substantial gift for Esau, sending it in advance in an attempt to appease his brother. This concludes Jacob's preparations for an encounter he dreaded for 20 years. The man who had fled his homeland as a fugitive now returned as a prosperous patriarch, still grappling with the consequences of his past and his faith in God's provision. Genesis 32 verses 22-32 narrates one of the most mysterious and transformative events in Jacob's life, his wrestling match with the angel at Peniel. That night, Jacob separated his family and wrestled with a man until daybreak. This nocturnal struggle symbolizes Jacob's internal battle between his past and his future. When the man saw that he could not overpower Jacob, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, causing him to limp. The man asked Jacob his name, and upon hearing Jacob, he declared, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed." The renaming of Jacob to Israel signifies a profound shift in his identity, no longer the supplanter, but one who has wrestled with God and prevailed. This encounter leaves Jacob blessed, yet wounded, his limp a constant reminder of his encounter with the divine. The long-anticipated meeting with Esau finally unfolds in Genesis 33 verses 1-11. Jacob saw Esau approaching with 400 men and carefully arranged his family, placing the maids and their children first, followed by Leah and her children, and finally Rachel and Joseph, himself walking ahead and bowing down 7 times. Esau's reaction was unexpected. He ran to meet Jacob, embraced him, and they wept. This powerful moment of reconciliation shows that time had indeed healed old wounds. Their subsequent dialogue reveals the generosity of both brothers, with Jacob insisting Esau accept his gifts, stating, "I have all I need." Genesis 33 verses 16-17 notes that Esau returned to his home, but Jacob traveled to Sukkot, where he built shelters for his livestock. Jacob's establishment in Sukkot, and later Shechem, marks a new chapter in his life. Genesis 33 verses 18-20 relates that Jacob settled near Shechem, purchasing land for 100 pieces of silver and erecting an altar he called Elilohizrael. However, this newfound peace is shattered by the incident involving his daughter Dinah, recounted in Genesis 34. Dinah, Leah's daughter, was violated by Shechem, a prince of the Hivites. Shechem, though falling in love with Dinah and seeking to marry her, is met with a vengeful plot by Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, who deceived the Shechemites into circumcision, only to massacre them while recovering. Jacob's response to this horrifying event reflects his utter horror and concern. He states in Genesis 34 verse 30, "Ye have brought trouble upon me, to make me odious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and I being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me, and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house." God instructs Jacob to go to Bethel, as Genesis 35 verses 2 to 3 details. Jacob, leading his family in a spiritual purification, commands, "Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. And let us arise, and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went." In Bethel, God reaffirms his promise to Jacob and confirms his name change to Israel, as Genesis 35 verses 11 to 12 records. God declares, "Thy name is Jacob. Thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name." And he called his name Israel. And God said unto him, "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. And the land which I gave unto Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land." On the journey from Bethel to Ephrath, Rachel goes into labor, resulting in a tragic event detailed in Genesis 35 verses 16 to 20. Rachel, dying in childbirth, names her son Benoni, "son of my sorrow." But Jacob renames him Benjamin, "son of my right hand." Rachel's death is a devastating blow to Jacob. The chapter concludes with another trial for Jacob Reuben's transgression, briefly mentioned in Genesis 35 verse 22. Reuben, sleeping with his father's concubine Bilhah, an act with lasting consequences affecting his position and inheritance. Jacob's journey, thus far, is characterized by both reconciliation and spiritual renewal, but also by personal and familial tragedies which persistently shaped both his character and the destiny of his lineage. Genesis 35 verse 27 marks Jacob's return to his father's house in Mamre, near Hebron. This return completes the cycle of Jacob's long and arduous journey, bringing him back to his roots. The death and burial of Isaac are briefly described in Genesis 35 verses 28 to 29. Isaac lived to be 180 years old, dying peacefully, buried by his sons Esau and Jacob. This moment of mourning temporarily unites the brothers. The narrative then shifts to Joseph, Jacob's favored son. Genesis 37 verses 3 to 4 states, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and could not speak peaceably unto him." Jacob's favoritism towards Joseph mirrors his own past as his mother's favorite son, creating similar tensions within the family. The coat of many colors becomes a symbol of this preferential treatment, fueling his brother's jealousy. Joseph's dreams, narrated in Genesis 37 verses 5 to 11, further intensify his brother's animosity. Joseph dreams of his sheaves of wheat standing tall while his brother's sheaves bow down. In another dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bow down to him. These dreams, though poorly received, foreshadow Joseph's future as the savior of his family. The sale of Joseph by his brothers marks a dramatic turning point. Genesis 37 verses 18 to 20 recounts their initial plan to kill him. "Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. Reuben, however, intervenes, suggesting they not kill him, but instead cast him into a pit, a compromise that ultimately failed to prevent Joseph's sale. Genesis 37 verses 26 to 28 narrates Judah's suggestion to sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites. And Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother, and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him. For he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. They sold Joseph for 20 shekels of silver to the Midianites, who took him to Egypt. Genesis 37 verses 31 to 33 details the deception of Jacob's sons. They took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in the blood, and presented it to their father. And they took Joseph's coat, and killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and said, this have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or not. Jacob, recognizing the robe, mourned deeply. Jacob's intense grief is poignantly described in Genesis 37 verses 34 to 35. And Jacob rent his clothes, and put sackcloth upon his loins, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and his daughters rose up to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Years of sadness and mourning for Joseph are a dark period in Jacob's life. Unable to comprehend the truth, he lives in deep pain, a pain that his family is powerless to alleviate. The narrative then shifts to a time of famine in the land of Canaan. Genesis 42 verses 1 to 2 recounts Jacob's decision to send his sons to Egypt to buy grain. And when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, why do ye look one upon another? And he said, behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither, and buy for us from thence, that we may live, and not die. Sending his sons to Egypt sets in motion a chain of events leading to the family's eventual reunion. The detention of Simeon and the demand to bring Benjamin on the next visit create a significant dilemma for Jacob. Genesis 42 verse 36 captures Jacob's anguish. And their father Jacob said unto them, me have ye bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, and Simeon is not, and ye will take Benjamin away. All these things are against me. Genesis 43 details the second trip to Egypt, with Judah's insistence and personal guarantee for Benjamin's safety convincing Jacob to let him go. Genesis 43 verses 11 to 14 shows Jacob blessing the mission. And their father Israel said unto them, if it must be so now, then take of the best fruits in the land in your vessels, and carry down the man a present, a little balm, and a little honey, spices, and myrrh, nuts, and almonds, and take double money in your hand, and the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks. Carry it again in your hand. Peradventure it was an oversight. Take also your brother, and arise. Go again unto the man. And God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may send away your other brother, and Benjamin. As for me, if I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. Joseph's revelation to his brothers, narrated in Genesis 45, is one of the most emotionally charged moments in the biblical narrative. Joseph reveals himself and sends his brothers back with a message for Jacob. Genesis 45 verses 9 to 11 relates, haste ye, and go up to my father, and say unto him, thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not, and thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou, and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast, and I will there nourish thee. For yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou, and thy household, and all that thou hast, come to poverty. The invitation for Jacob to move to Egypt is initially met with disbelief, as Genesis 45 verses 26 to 28 reveals. And they told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And his heart fainted, for he believed them not. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And Israel said, It is enough. Joseph my son is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. Jacob receives divine confirmation in a dream, as Genesis 46 verses 2 to 4 narrates. And God spake unto Israel in the visions of the night, and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here am I. And he said, I am God, the God of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation. I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will also surely bring thee up again. This divine assurance bolsters Jacob's resolve to journey to Egypt. Joseph's own hand would gently close his father's eyes. Genesis 46 verses 29 to 30 details the journey to Egypt and the deeply emotional reunion with Joseph. Joseph had his chariot prepared and traveled to Goshen to meet his father, Israel. The moment Joseph appeared before his father, he embraced him, weeping for a considerable time. Israel declared, Now I am ready to die, having seen with my own eyes that you are still alive. Their settlement in Goshen marked the commencement of the final chapter of Jacob's life. Genesis 47 verses 7 to 10 recounts Jacob's meeting with Pharaoh. Joseph brought his father before the Pharaoh. After Jacob bestowed a blessing upon the Pharaoh inquired about Jacob's age. Jacob replied that he had lived 130 years, years that had been few, arduous, and far shorter than the lifespans of his ancestors. He then blessed Pharaoh and departed from his presence. The last 17 years of Jacob's life in Egypt were characterized by relative peace and prosperity. Genesis 47 verses 27 to 28 summarizes this period. The Israelites settled in the region of Goshen, prospered, and multiplied significantly. Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years, extending his total lifespan to 147 years. Genesis 48 and 49 record Jacob's final blessings. He adopted Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, elevating them to the status of tribes, mirroring his own journey. Significantly, he crossed his hands while blessing them, bestowing the greater blessing upon the younger, Ephraim. The prophecies for each of Jacob's 12 sons, narrated in Genesis 49, are rich with symbolism and implications for Israel's future as a nation. Each son received a blessing, or in some instances, a rebuke, that would profoundly shape the destiny of his tribe. Jacob's instructions for his burial were explicit and unwavering. Genesis 49 verses 29 to 32 states, I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. And there I buried Leah. Genesis 49:33-50:13 describes Jacob's death and the ensuing national mourning in Egypt. After imparting his final instructions to his sons, Jacob drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Joseph fell upon his father, weeping and kissing him. Joseph then instructed his physicians to embalm his father, a process that took 40 days. The Egyptians mourned for him for 70 days. The grand funeral and burial in the cave of Machpelah, narrated in Genesis 50 verses 7 to 13, marked the end of Jacob's earthly life, yet not the end of his enduring legacy. Jacob's compelling narrative of struggle, deception, loss, and reconciliation serves as a testament to God's unwavering faithfulness and the complexities of the human experience. His journey powerfully demonstrates that God can utilize even our failures and struggles to achieve His divine purposes. What lessons have you gleaned from the life of this patriarch? How does Jacob's story resonate with your own journey of faith? If this account has moved you or prompted reflection, share it with others who might benefit from this message. Jacob's story reminds us that transformation is possible for all. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to the channel and enable notifications so you won't miss future videos about biblical characters and the life lessons they offer. Remember, just as God worked in Jacob's life, He desires to work in yours as well. Have you ever felt dwarfed by an insurmountable challenge? Have you ever experienced the crushing sensation that the entire world was arrayed against you, even when your conscience told you you were doing what was right? So, you share more common ground with one of history's greatest kings than you might initially imagine. Prepare yourself to delve into the incredible, transformative journey of David, a humble shepherd boy who ascended to become Israel's most beloved man after God's own heart. But don't be misled. David wasn't perfect. His life story is a rich tapestry woven with threads of exhilarating triumph and devastating failure, and it's precisely this complex blend that renders his journey so captivating and profoundly relevant to our lives today. Let's begin at the very start, tracing the improbable rise of a young shepherd to the king's court. Our story unfolds in Bethlehem, a small, unassuming town nestled on the outskirts of Jerusalem. Here we meet the family of Jesse, an ordinary man whose lineage was poised to irrevocably alter the course of Israel's history. In 1 Samuel 16 verse 1, we read of the Lord dispatching the prophet Samuel to Bethlehem, specifically to the house of Jesse, burdened with a secret, pivotal mission to anoint the new king of Israel. Jesse had 8 sons, and David was the youngest. While his elder brothers stood out for their imposing strength and stature, David spent his days in the fields, tending his father's sheep. This seemingly unremarkable task, however, was subtly shaping the character of the future king. In the tranquil yet challenging fields of Bethlehem, David learned lessons no palace could ever teach. He cultivated unwavering courage while safeguarding his flock from predatory animals, nurturing compassion as he cared for the weaker sheep, and honing leadership skills as he guided his flock to lush pastures and still waters. Unbeknownst to him, he was diligently being prepared to shepherd an entire nation. In 1 Samuel 16 verse 11, when Samuel arrived at Jesse's house, all the older sons were presented, one by one, for consideration. Yet, the Lord had not chosen any of them. Intrigued, Samuel inquired whether Jesse had any more sons. "There is still the youngest," Jesse replied, "but he is tending the sheep." When David finally arrived, Samuel's heart must have leapt. There stood a young man possessing a ruddy complexion, captivating eyes, and handsome features. But what truly mattered was what the Lord saw. "Rise and anoint him," the Lord instructed Samuel, "for this is the one." 1 Samuel 16 verse 13 recounts the pivotal moment that would forever alter David's life and the destiny of Israel. Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed David in the presence of his brothers. At that very instant, the Spirit of the Lord descended upon David with overwhelming power. Imagine the scene. A young shepherd, likely bewildered and surprised, being consecrated as the future king of Israel. His brothers, who had always viewed him as the youngest, the least significant, were now witnessing something truly extraordinary. Yet, David's journey had only just begun. Following his anointing, David returned to the fields. Externally, nothing had visibly changed. He remained a shepherd, still tending his sheep. But internally, a profound transformation had commenced. The Spirit of the Lord was with him, meticulously preparing him for the challenges and responsibilities that lay ahead. Meanwhile, in King Saul's court, a palpable darkness was settling in. 1 Samuel 16 verses 14 to 23 tells us that the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and a malevolent spirit relentlessly tormented him. Seeking a solution, Saul's servants suggested finding someone skilled in playing the harp, believing that music might soothe the disturbed king. And so, David's name surfaced. One of the servants knew him, describing him not only as a talented musician, but also as a brave warrior, eloquent and wise in speech, possessing a pleasing appearance. And, most significantly, the Lord was with him. Thus, David was summoned to Saul's court. The young shepherd, who had recently spent his days in the quiet solitude of Bethlehem's fields, now found himself in the opulent, yet treacherous, environment of the royal palace, playing his harp to calm the tormented spirit of the king. Saul was deeply impressed by David and appointed him his armor-bearer. At this juncture in the narrative, we witness God's masterful orchestration of events. David's musical talent, cultivated during those long hours in the fields, now positioned him to learn the intricacies of courtly life and leadership, further preparing him for his future role. But the event that would truly define David's youth was yet to come. In 1 Samuel 17, we encounter the legendary confrontation between David and Goliath. The Israelite army was locked in a bitter war with the Philistines, and a Philistine champion, Goliath, issued a daily challenge to the Israelites: send forth a champion for single combat. Goliath was a colossal figure, standing approximately 10 feet tall, his armor weighing over 100 pounds, and the shaft of his spear resembling a weaver's beam. For 40 days, he taunted the Israelite army, daring them to send a champion to face him. David, having temporarily returned to tend his father's sheep, was sent to the battlefield to deliver supplies to his older brothers. Upon his arrival, he overheard Goliath's challenge and felt a surge of righteous indignation. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine?" he asked, "that he should defy the armies of the living God?" David's courage in the face of the giant wasn't a spontaneous eruption. It had been meticulously forged in the crucible of the Bethlehem fields, where he had confronted and overcome lions and bears to protect his flock. When questioned about his ability to face Goliath, David responded with unwavering confidence. "The Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Armed only with his sling, 5 smooth stones from a brook, and an unshakable faith in God, David stepped forward to face Goliath. The contrast couldn't have been starker. A young shepherd against a seasoned warrior, a sling against a sword, faith against brute strength. When Goliath saw David, he scoffed at his youth. "Am I a dog?" the giant mocked. "That you come to me with sticks?" But David responded with words that would resonate through the ages. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." With a single stone from his sling, David struck Goliath squarely in the forehead, and the giant fell instantly. The improbable had happened. The shepherd had vanquished the warrior. Faith had triumphed over fear. David's victory over Goliath wasn't merely a military triumph. It was a powerful testament to the strength derived from faith in God. It demonstrated to Israel and the world that God sees differently than man sees. While others focused on outward appearances, God looked upon the heart. This event marked the true beginning of David's ascent. transforming him from an obscure shepherd boy in Bethlehem into a national hero overnight. The women sang in the streets, proclaiming, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." David's youth, from his secret anointing to his public victory over Goliath, laid the bedrock for all that was to come. It imparts powerful lessons about preparation, courage, and unwavering trust in God. David didn't become a great leader overnight. Each experience in his youth tending sheep, playing music for Saul, facing Goliath served as a crucial building block in the construction of his character and leadership. He confronted his Goliaths long before stepping onto the battlefield. The story of David's youth reminds us that God often works behind the scenes, preparing us for a purpose far grander than we can fathom. In moments that appear insignificant, when we feel overlooked or underestimated, God may be diligently shaping our character and developing the skills we'll need for our future. David's courage in the face of Goliath challenges us to confront our own giants with unwavering faith. What are the Goliaths in our life spheres? Insecurities? Seemingly insurmountable challenges? David's story reminds us that with God, no obstacle is too great. Finally, David's youth teaches us the profound importance of faithfulness in small things. Before leading armies, David led sheep. Before playing before crowds, he played in the solitary fields. His faithfulness in these seemingly insignificant tasks prepared him for the immense responsibilities that would follow. As we move forward in David's story, we will see how these formative years shaped the man he would become. His experiences as a shepherd, musician, and young warrior laid the groundwork for his reign as the greatest king of Israel. But the road ahead would be far from easy. David would face challenges, persecutions, and temptations that would test his faith and character to their absolute limits. David's victory over Goliath marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. The young shepherd was now renowned throughout Israel as a war hero. While the people celebrated, an unlikely friendship began to blossom in the court of King Saul. Jonathan, Saul's son and heir to the throne, was profoundly impressed by David. The biblical text provides a poignant description of this friendship in 1 Samuel 18 verse 1. "And it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul." This wasn't a superficial friendship. It was a deep bond rooted in mutual respect and admiration. The depth of this friendship is strikingly illustrated in Jonathan's actions. In 1 Samuel 18 verse 4, we witness a symbolic and significant gesture. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic, sword, bow, and belt. This wasn't merely a gift exchanged between friends. In the cultural context of the time, it was a powerful acknowledgement of David's right to the throne. Jonathan, the rightful heir, was essentially relinquishing his claim in favor of David. As this extraordinary friendship flourished, David also gained favor in the eyes of King Saul and the people. In 1 Samuel 18 verse 5, we read, "And Saul took him that day, and would let him go no more home to his father's house." David demonstrated not only exceptional courage on the battlefield but also wisdom and skill in leadership. However, David's success would soon become a source of profound trouble. After a significant military victory, the women of Israel celebrated by singing, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s, 1 Samuel 18 verse 7. This song, while meant to honor both Saul and David, inadvertently ignited a burning jealousy in the heart of the king. Saul's reaction to this song marks a dramatic turning point in his relationship with David. In 1 Samuel 18 verses 8 to 9, we read, "And Saul was very wroth, and this saying displeased him. And he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. and what can he have more but the kingdom? From that moment onward, Saul's watchful eye fell upon David with increasing suspicion and hostility. Saul's jealousy swiftly escalated into hostile actions against David. The very next day, as recounted in 1 Samuel 18 verses 10 to 11, the Spirit from the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. Saul was prophesying in his house, and David was playing the lyre, as was his custom. Saul held a javelin in his hand, intending to pin David to the wall, but David eluded him twice. This incident marked the commencement of a prolonged series of attempts by Saul to kill David. The young warrior, once welcomed into the king's court, now found himself in perpetual danger. Despite Saul's escalating hostility, David continued to prosper. In 1 Samuel 18 verses 14 to 16, we read, "And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Wherefore Saul removed him from him, and made him his captain over 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him." Seeing that he couldn't eliminate David directly, Saul resorted to more subtle schemes to bring about his demise. One of these attempts involved his own daughter, Michal. In 1 Samuel 18 verses 20 to 21, we read, "Now Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul said, I will give him her, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be upon him." Saul offered Michal in marriage to David, but with a treacherous condition. He demanded as a dowry 100 foreskins of Philistines, hoping that David would perish in the attempt to fulfill this task. However, David not only survived but exceeded the requirement, bringing back 200 foreskins. Saul then had no choice but to give Michal in marriage to David. The marriage to Michal, however, did not bring David safety. Saul's hostility continued to intensify. In 1 Samuel 19 verse 1, we read, "And Saul spake to Jonathan his son, and to all his servants, that they should kill David. Jonathan, however, was deeply devoted to David." Here, we see how the friendship between David and Jonathan would prove crucial for David's survival. Jonathan, risking his own standing, interceded for David with his father. In 1 Samuel 19 verses 4 to 5, he argued, "Let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he hath not sinned against thee, and because his works have been to thee ward very good. For he did put his life in his hand, and slew the Philistine, and the Lord wrought a great salvation for all Israel. Thou sawest it, and didst rejoice. Wherefore then wilt thou sin against innocent blood, to slay David without a cause?" Temporarily swayed by Jonathan's pleas, Saul swore, "As the Lord liveth, he shall not be slain." 1 Samuel 19 verse 6, however, this peace proved short-lived. The evil spirit soon returned to torment Saul, and he once again attempted to kill David with his spear. David managed to escape, but it was clear that he was no longer safe in Saul's court. At this point, Michal, David's wife, played a pivotal role in his escape. In 1 Samuel 19 verses 11 to 12, we read, "And Saul sent messengers unto David's house, to watch him, and to slay him in the morning. And Michal David's wife told him, saying, If thou save not thy life tonight, tomorrow thou shalt be slain. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went, and fled, and escaped. Thus began David's period of exile. The man who had once been the hero of Israel and the favorite of the court now found himself forced to live as a fugitive in his own land. During this time, David sought refuge in various places. First, he went to Ahimelech the priest at Nob. Not wanting to reveal his true situation, David lied about being on a secret mission from the king. Ahimelech, unaware of the danger, provided David with consecrated bread and the sword of Goliath. This event, though seemingly insignificant, would have tragic consequences later. Doeg the Edomite, one of Saul's servants, was present and later reported the incident to Saul, leading to the execution of Ahimelech and many other priests from Nob. David fled to Gath, Philistine territory, where he feigned madness to avoid being recognized as the renowned Israelite warrior. Afterward, he took refuge in the cave of Adullam, where he was joined by his family and by everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented. 1 Samuel 22 verse 2. Meanwhile, Saul continued his relentless pursuit of David. The king's obsession with eliminating David led to extreme acts of cruelty, including the massacre of the priests of Nob who had unknowingly aided David. During this period of flight, David had two notable opportunities to kill Saul, but he steadfastly refused to do so. The first occurred in the cave of En-Gedi. Saul entered the cave to relieve himself, unaware that David and his men were hiding there. In 1 Samuel 24 verses 4 to 6, we read, "And the men said unto David, Behold, the day of which the Lord said unto thee, Behold, I will deliver thine enemy into thine hand, that thou mayest do to him as it shall seem good unto thee. Then David arose, and cut off a skirt of Saul's robe privily. And it came to pass afterward, that David's heart smote him, because he had cut off Saul's skirt. David was deeply troubled by his action, and said to his men, The Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth mine hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord." The second opportunity arose when David secretly entered Saul's camp at night and found the king sleeping. Again, David refused to kill Saul, saying in 1 Samuel 26 verses 9 to 11, "And David said to Abishai, Destroy him not, for who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed, and be guiltless?" David said furthermore, "As the Lord liveth, the Lord shall smite him, or his day shall come to die, or he shall descend into battle, and perish. But the Lord forbid me from stretching forth mine hand against the Lord's anointed." These actions demonstrate David's profound respect for the divinely established authority, even when that authority was being unjustly wielded against him. David recognized that despite Saul's flaws, he was still God's anointed king, and it wasn't David's place to seize the kingdom by force. Saul's persecution of David lasted for years, forcing David to live as a fugitive in his own country and even among Israel's enemies. During this time, David composed many of the Psalms we know today, expressing his anguish, his unwavering trust in God, and his determination to remain faithful. This period of flight and exile was a crucible, a time of profound formation for David. Away from the comforts of the palace and the glory of military victories, David learned to trust in God under the most harrowing circumstances. He developed exceptional leadership skills, gathering and commanding a diverse group of men. These experiences meticulously prepared him for the role he would eventually assume as king of Israel. Saul's pursuit of David would finally end with the king's death in battle against the Philistines. Saul, facing utter defeat, took his own life to avoid capture. When the news reached David, his reaction was one of lament, not of joy. In 2 Samuel 1 verses 19 to 24, we read part of David's lament. "The beauty of Israel is slain upon thy high places. How are the mighty fallen? Tell it not in Gath. Publish it not in the streets of Askelon. Lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. Ye mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew, neither let there be rain upon you, nor fields of offerings. For there the shield of the mighty is vilely cast away, the shield of Saul, as though he had not been anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul returned not empty. This lament demonstrates David's noble character. Even after years of persecution, he could still recognize the good in Saul and honor his memory. Furthermore, David's lament for Jonathan is particularly moving, underscoring the profound depth of their friendship. David's journey, from close friend of the king to hunted enemy, was long and arduous. However, through these trials, David's character was refined and strengthened. He learned lessons of humility, patience, and unwavering trust in God that would prove indispensable in his future role as king of Israel. The story of David and Saul imparts valuable lessons about leadership, jealousy, friendship, and faithfulness to God. We see how envy can corrupt even those chosen by God, and how integrity and faith can sustain a person through the most difficult trials. As David prepared to ascend to the throne that God had promised him years before, he carried with him the lessons learned during those years of persecution. These experiences would profoundly shape his reign and his relationship with God in the years to come. The news of Saul and Jonathan's death reached David through a young Amalekite. The messenger, hoping for a reward, claimed to have delivered the final blow to Saul at the king's request. However, his expectation of reward was thwarted by David's decisive reaction. In 2 Samuel 1 verses 14 to 16, we read, "Then David said unto him, How wast thou not afraid to stretch forth thine hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? And David called one of the young men, and said, Go near, and fall upon him. And he smote him that he died. And David said unto him, Thy blood be upon thy head, for thy mouth hath testified against thee, saying, I have slain the Lord's anointed." This action by David demonstrated his deep respect for the divinely appointed authority, even when that authority had been used against him. It also served as a stark warning to all that any attempt to curry favor with David through violence against his enemies would be met with severe punishment. After a period of mourning, David sought divine guidance for his next step. In 2 Samuel 2 verse 1, we read, "And it came to pass after this, that David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said unto him, Go up. David then asked, Whither shall I go? And the Lord answered, Unto Hebron." This consultation with God before taking action would become a hallmark of David's reign, setting him apart from Saul, who often acted rashly and impulsively. Upon arriving in Hebron, David was anointed king over the tribe of Judah. In 2 Samuel 2 verse 4, it is written, "So the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah." This was the first step in the fulfillment of the promise that God had made to David years earlier, when he was secretly anointed by Samuel. However, David's ascension to the throne of all Israel would not be immediate or easily achieved. Abner, the commander of Saul's army, had proclaimed Ishbosheth, Saul's son, as king over the other tribes of Israel. This initiated a period of civil war between the house of Saul and the house of David. In 2 Samuel 3 verse 1, we read, "Now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. But David waxed stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul waxed weaker and weaker." This verse aptly summarizes the general course of events during this period, but the details of this civil war are marked by tragedy and complexity. One of the most significant events of this period was the death of Abner. After a falling out with Ishbosheth, Abner decided to switch his allegiance to David. He was welcomed by David and sent away in peace. However, Joab, David's military commander, viewed Abner as a threat and assassinated him in revenge for the death of his brother. David's reaction to this assassination is telling. In 2 Samuel 3 verses 28 to 29, David declares, "And when David heard it, he said, 'The Lord shall require the blood of Abner at the hand of Joab, and at the hand of his seed. It shall not depart from the house of Joab forever.'" This statement shows David's unwavering commitment to justice and his refusal to tolerate unnecessary violence, even when perpetrated by his own men. The civil war eventually came to an end with the assassination of Ishbosheth by two of his own captains. Hoping to gain favor with David, they brought Ishbosheth's head to Hebron. Once again, David's reaction surprised everyone. In 2 Samuel 4 verses 9 to 12, we read, "And David answered Rechab and Baanah his brother, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, and said unto them, As the Lord liveth, who hath redeemed my soul out of all adversity, when one told me, saying, Behold, Saul is dead, thinking to have brought good tidings, I took hold of him, and slew him in Ziklag, who thought that I would have given him a reward for his tidings. How much more, when wicked men have slain a righteous person in his own house upon his bed? Shall I not therefore now require his blood of your hand, and take you away from the earth? Should I not now demand his blood from your hand, and rid the earth of you?" So David gave orders to his men, and they killed them. They cut off their hands and feet and hung the bodies by the pool in Hebron. However, they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in Abner's tomb at Hebron. With Ishbosheth's death, the path was clear for David to become king over all Israel. In 2 Samuel 5 verses 1 to 3, we witness the unification of the kingdom. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and declared, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul reigned over us, you were the one who led Israel in its military campaigns. And the Lord declared to you, You will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler." When all the elders of Israel had assembled before King David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. This anointing at Hebron fulfilled the promise God had made to David years earlier. The shepherd of sheep, the court musician, the fugitive warrior, was now the king of all Israel. One of David's first acts as king of a unified Israel was the conquest of Jerusalem. 2 Samuel 5 verses 6 to 7 recounts, "The king and his men marched to Jerusalem to attack the Jebusites who lived there. The Jebusites taunted David, saying, You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." They believed David could not conquer them. Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, which became known as the City of David. The choice of Jerusalem as the capital was a stroke of strategic brilliance. Situated on the border between the territories of the northern and southern tribes, Jerusalem served as a unifying focal point for the nation. Furthermore, because it had not previously been associated with any specific tribe, could become a truly national city, transcending tribal allegiances. After establishing Jerusalem as his capital, David faced the threat of the Philistines. 2 Samuel 5 verses 17 to 21 details David's response to this situation. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they came up in full force to find him. But David learned of their approach and descended to the stronghold. The Philistines had deployed in the valley of Rephaim. David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands?" The Lord answered him, "Go, for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands." So David went to Baal-perazim, and there he defeated them. He declared, "As waters break forth, so the Lord has broken forth against my enemies before me." Therefore, that place was called Baal-perazim. The Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. This victory over the Philistines was significant not just militarily, but also spiritually. The capture and destruction of the Philistine idols symbolized the supremacy of the God of Israel over the gods of neighboring nations. With the nation unified and the capital established, David turned his attention to religious matters. One of his priorities was to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. The Ark, representing God's presence among his people, had been absent from the center of national life for many years. The first attempt to bring the Ark to Jerusalem, however, ended in tragedy. 2 Samuel 6 verses 6 to 7 recounts. As they arrived at the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and touched the Ark of God, because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah for his irreverent act, and God struck him down there beside the Ark of God, and he died. This incident served as a stark lesson for David and all Israel regarding the holiness of God and the absolute necessity of meticulously following his instructions. After a 3-month period during which the Ark remained in the house of Obed-Edom, David made a second attempt to bring it to Jerusalem. This time, the Ark was transported according to God's instructions, carried by the Levites. The Ark's arrival in Jerusalem was met with great celebration. 2 Samuel 6 verses 14 to 15 describes the jubilant scene. David, wearing a linen ephod, danced before the Lord with all his might. As he and all Israel brought up the Ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets, David danced before the Lord. David's dance before the Ark was an unrestrained act of pure worship and devotion to the Lord. However, not everyone shared in this enthusiastic expression of faith. Michal, Saul's daughter and David's wife, scorned him for his behavior. David's response to Michal in 2 Samuel 6 verses 21 to 22 reveals much about his character and priorities. David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord, who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house, when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But with these slave girls you mentioned, I will be held in honor." With the Ark established in Jerusalem, David desired to build a permanent temple to house it. However, God had other plans. 2 Samuel 7 verses 5 to 7 relays God's message through the prophet Nathan. "Go and tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in? I have not dwelt in a house since the day I brought the Israelites up out of Egypt to this day, but I have been moving from place to place with a tent as my dwelling. Wherever I have moved with all the Israelites, did I ever say to any of their rulers whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, 'Why have you not built me a house of cedar?'" Although God denied David's request to build the temple, he made an extraordinary promise to David in 2 Samuel 7 verses 11 to 16. God promises through Nathan, "The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, one of your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish his throne forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, with floggings inflicted by human hands. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever." This promise, known as the Davidic covenant, is one of the most significant events in the history of Israel. God promised David an everlasting dynasty promise that would ultimately find its fulfillment in Jesus Christ, the son of David par excellence. David's response to this promise is a prayer of profound gratitude and humility. 2 Samuel 7 verses 18 to 19 records David's words. Then King David went in and sat before the Lord and said, "Who am I, sovereign Lord, and what is my family, that you have brought me this far? And as if this were not enough in your sight, sovereign Lord, you have also spoken about the future of the house of your servant. Is this your usual way of dealing with mankind, sovereign Lord?" David's ascension to the throne of Israel marked the beginning of a new era for the nation. Under his leadership, Israel became a regional power, expanding its borders and forging alliances with neighboring nations. More importantly, David established Jerusalem not only as the political capital of Israel but also as its spiritual center. David's reign would not be without its challenges and personal failings, as we shall see in subsequent chapters. However, the foundations he laid during these early years a unified nation, an established capital, and above all, a renewed commitment to God would profoundly shape the future of Israel for generations to come. David's journey from obscurity in Bethlehem to the throne in Jerusalem powerfully illustrates God's sovereignty and his plan for his people. Through each stage, from shepherd to court musician, from fugitive warrior to King, David demonstrated an unwavering trust in God and a steadfast commitment to his will. David's ascent to the throne was not merely a personal achievement. It was a turning point in the history of Israel. Under his leadership, the nation found unity, strength, and a renewed sense of divine purpose. The choice of Jerusalem as the capital and the establishment of the Ark of the Covenant there laid the groundwork for what would become the central location of Jewish worship for centuries. The Davidic covenant, God's promise of an eternal dynasty, pointed beyond the immediate kingdom of David toward a future messianic hope. This promise would become central to the hope and faith of Israel, ultimately finding its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. The story of David's rise teaches valuable lessons about patience, perseverance, and trust in God's timing. David waited years for the fulfillment of God's promise, facing persecution and exile. However, he refused to seize the kingdom by force, respecting the authority established by God, even when that authority acted unjustly. At the same time, we see in David a leader who was not perfect, but who was willing to learn from his mistakes and seek God's guidance. His reaction to the death of Uzzah and his subsequent careful approach to bringing the ark to Jerusalem demonstrate a heart willing to submit to God's will, even when it meant admitting and correcting errors. As David established himself as king over all Israel, new challenges awaited him. His reign would be marked by great victories and territorial expansion, but also by deep personal failures and painful family conflicts. However, the foundation laid during these early years a deep dependence on God, a commitment to justice, and a heart of worship would continue to define his reign and legacy. David's ascent to the throne is not simply a story of personal success. It is a testament to the transformative power of God in the life of an individual and a nation. It is a story that continues to inspire and instruct, reminding us that God can use unlikely people to accomplish his purposes, and that true greatness comes from humble submission to the divine will. With the kingdom unified and the capital established in Jerusalem, David turned his attention to expanding and strengthening Israel. His military campaigns were marked by notable successes. 2 Samuel 8 verses 2-6 describes some of his conquests. He also defeated the Moabites. He made them lie down on the ground and measured them with a cord. Every 2 measures of men he separated one to be killed and 1 complete measure to remain alive. So the Moabites became subject to David and brought tribute. David also defeated Hadadezer son of Rehob, king of Zobah, as he went to restore his monument along the Euphrates River. David captured 1,000 of his chariots, 7,000 cavalry and 20,000 foot soldiers. He hamstrung all the chariot horses, except 100 of them. When the Arameans of Damascus came to help Hadadezer king of Zobah, David struck down 22,000 of them. He put garrisons in the Aramean kingdom of Damascus, and the Arameans became subject to him and brought tribute. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. These victories not only expanded the borders of Israel but also brought great wealth to the kingdom. David dedicated much of the war plunder to the Lord, demonstrating his gratitude for God's victories. David's reign was also marked by acts of justice and compassion. In 2 Samuel 9 verse 1, we see David asking, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" This led to the encounter with Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, to whom David showed great kindness, fulfilling his promise to Jonathan. However, at the height of his power and success, David committed a sin that would tarnish his reign and bring lasting consequences. The story begins in 2 Samuel 11 verses 1 to 2. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. This woman was Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite, one of David's elite soldiers. Instead of turning away, David sent for her and committed adultery with her. When Bathsheba informed him that she was pregnant, David attempted to cover up his sin. First, he called Uriah back from the battlefield, hoping he would sleep with his wife and thus believe the child was his. But Uriah, demonstrating remarkable integrity, refused to enjoy the comforts of home while his comrades were in battle. In 2 Samuel 11 verse 11, Uriah says to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my lord Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." Seeing that his initial plan had failed, David made an even darker decision. He sent Uriah back to battle with a message for Joab, ordering that Uriah be put in the front lines of the fiercest fighting and then abandoned to die. After Uriah's death, David took Bathsheba as his wife. David may have thought his sin would remain hidden, but nothing escapes God's eyes. In 2 Samuel 12 verse 1, we read, "The Lord sent Nathan to David." The prophet Nathan confronted David with a parable about a rich man who stole and killed the only sheep of a poor man. Indignant at the injustice of the story, David declared that the man deserved to die. It was then that Nathan pronounced, "You are that man." Nathan's confrontation led David to repentance. In 2 Samuel 12 verse 13, David confesses, "I have sinned against the Lord." Although God forgave David, the consequences of his sin were severe. Nathan prophesied that the sword would never depart from David's house, and that the child born of his union with Bathsheba would die. Indeed, the child of David and Bathsheba became ill and, despite David's pleas, died after 7 days. David's reaction to this loss is remarkable. In 2 Samuel 12 verse 20, we read, "Then David got up from the ground, washed himself, put on lotions and changed his clothes. He went into the house of the Lord and worshipped." When questioned about his behavior, David demonstrated his faith in God's sovereignty, saying in 2 Samuel 12 verse 23, "But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me." The consequences of David's sin continued to unfold in the following years. One of Nathan's most painful predictions was fulfilled when Amnon, David's son, raped his half-sister Tamar. This act led to a cycle of revenge and rebellion that culminated in Absalom's revolt. Absalom's rebellion forced David to flee from Jerusalem, in a scene that echoed his previous flight from Saul. In 2 Samuel 15 verse 30, we see a moving image of David. But David continued up the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered and he was barefoot. All the people with him covered their heads and were weeping as they went up. During his flight, David faced insults and humiliations, but he responded with humility and trust in God. When Shimei, a man from Saul's family, cursed David, he replied, as recorded in 2 Samuel 16 verses 11 to 12, "Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore to me his covenant blessing instead of his curse today." Absalom's rebellion ended with his death, against David's explicit orders to spare his son's life. David's lament for Absalom's death is one of the most emotionally powerful moments in the Bible. In 2 Samuel 18 verse 33, we read, "The king was shaken. He went up to the room over the gateway and wept as he went. He said, 'Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. O Absalom, my son, my son.'" Despite these personal challenges and tragedies, David's reign continued to be marked by military victories and prosperity for Israel. However, near the end of his reign, David committed another significant error by taking an unauthorized census of the people. In 2 Samuel 24 verse 10, David acknowledges his mistake. After he had counted the fighting men, David was conscience-stricken and he said to the Lord, "I have sinned greatly in what I have done. Now, Lord, I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done a very foolish thing." This census resulted in a plague that claimed the lives of 70,000 Israelites. The plague was only stopped when David built an altar and offered sacrifices at the site that would later become the location of the temple. David's reign, with its glories and sins, serves as a powerful reminder of the complexity of human nature and the constant need to trust in God. Despite his failures, David maintained a heart turned toward God, always seeking repentance and restoration when he fell. That is why, despite his sins, David is remembered as a man after God's own heart. In the last years of his reign, David turned his attention to a project he had long desired to undertake, the construction of a temple for the Lord. Although God indicated that it would be David's son, not David himself, who would build the temple, David dedicated himself to making extensive preparations for this great undertaking. 1 Chronicles 22 verse 5 describes David's efforts. David said, "My son Solomon is young and inexperienced, and the house that is to be built for the Lord should be of great magnificence and fame and splendor in the sight of all the nations. Therefore I will make preparations for it." So David made extensive preparations before his death. David's dedication to the cause of the temple is evident in the amount of resources he gathered for the project. In 1 Chronicles 22 verse 14, David declares, "I have taken great pains to provide for the temple of the Lord, 100,000 talents of gold, 1,000,000 talents of silver, quantities of bronze and iron too great to be weighed, and wood and stone. You may add to them." In addition to the material resources, David also took care to organize the Levites and priests for service in the future temple. He established shifts for the priests, organized the musicians and singers, and designated gatekeepers for the temple. All these preparations demonstrate David's concern to ensure that the worship of God would be conducted with reverence and order after his death. As David grew older, the question of succession to the throne became pressing. Although God had already chosen Solomon to succeed David, there was an attempted usurpation by Adonijah, another son of David. This succession crisis is described in 1 Kings 1. In response to this threat, David acted decisively to establish Solomon as his successor. 1 Kings 1 verses 32 to 35 recounts, "King David said, 'Call in Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet and Benaiah son of Jehoiada.' When they came before the king, he He said to them, "Take your Lord's servants with you and have Solomon my son ride my own mule and take him down to Gin. There have Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet anoint him king over Israel. Blow the trumpet and shout, 'Long live King Solomon!' Follow him up to the throne, and he is to sit on my throne and reign in my place. I have appointed him ruler over Israel and Judah." With Solomon firmly established as his successor, David turned his attention to giving his final instructions, both to Solomon and to the people of Israel. In 1 Kings 2 verses 2-4, David gives wise counsel to Solomon. "I am about to go the way of all the earth. So be strong, act like a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in his ways, and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations, as written in the law of Moses, so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel." In his last recorded words, David addresses the entire assembly of Israel. In 1 Chronicles 29 verses 10-13, he offers a beautiful prayer of praise and thanksgiving. David praised the Lord in the presence of the whole assembly, saying, "Praise be to you, Lord, the God of our father Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. Yours, Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the majesty and the splendor, for everything in heaven and earth is yours. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom. You are exalted as head over all. Wealth and honor come from you. You are the ruler of all things. In your hands are strength and power to exalt and give strength to all. Now our God, we give you thanks and praise your glorious name." After a life filled with highs and lows, great triumphs and painful failures, David finally rested. 1 Kings 2 verses 10-11 recounts, "Then David rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. He had reigned for 40 years over Israel, 7 years in Hebron and 33 in Jerusalem." David's legacy, however, continued far beyond his death. His impact on the history and faith of Israel is immeasurable. We can see this impact in several areas. First, David is remembered as the ideal king in Israel. Even centuries after his death, subsequent kings were often compared to David. A king like David became synonymous with a just and God-fearing king. Secondly, David left a significant literary legacy in the form of the Psalms. Many of the Psalms are attributed to David, and they continue to be a source of comfort, inspiration, and guidance for the faithful today. David's Psalms express the full range of human experience, from joy to sorrow, from trust to despair, always within the context of an unwavering faith in God. Thirdly, and perhaps most significantly, David became central to Israel's messianic expectations. God's promise to David of an eternal dynasty, the Davidic covenant, led to the hope of a son of David who would establish an everlasting kingdom. This hope found its fulfillment in the person of Jesus Christ. In Matthew 1 verse 1, the New Testament begins with these words, "This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham." Jesus is often referred to as the son of David in the Gospels, and his Davidic lineage is seen as the life of David, with all its intricate complexities, offers profound lessons that resonate far beyond his specific historical context. His story serves as a powerful testament to God's sovereign hand in history. God's choice of David, the youngest son of Jesse, to become Israel's greatest king underscores the recurring theme that God often works through the seemingly unlikely and underestimated individuals to fulfill his purposes. David's life also exemplifies the crucial importance of unwavering faith and trust in God. From his courageous confrontation with Goliath, through his years as a fugitive, and finally to his reign as king, David consistently demonstrated an unshakable reliance on God, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. His unwavering faith, even amidst adversity, serves as an inspiring example for believers today. However, David's narrative doesn't shy away from the stark reality of sin and its devastating consequences, even in the lives of those considered heroes of faith. His adulterous affair with Bathsheba and the subsequent murder of Uriah resulted in far-reaching and tragic repercussions. This stark portrayal of his failings emphasizes the universal human struggle with sin and the weight of its consequences. Yet, even amidst his profound failings, David's story offers a powerful message of hope through genuine repentance and restoration. His heartfelt response to the prophet Nathan's confrontation, his humble acceptance of God's judgment, and sincere remorse provides a compelling model for how we should respond to our own failures and shortcomings. His repentance, far from being a token gesture, demonstrated a deep understanding of the gravity of his sins and a genuine desire for forgiveness. David's experience also highlights the boundless nature of God's forgiveness and restorative power. Despite the gravity of his sins, David experienced God's complete forgiveness and was restored to fellowship with him. This offers profound hope to all, demonstrating that no matter how far we stray, forgiveness and restoration are always available to those who turn to God with a contrite heart and a sincere desire for repentance. The depth of God's mercy is overwhelmingly emphasized in David's story. Finally, David's life challenges our conventional understanding of greatness. His story underscores that true greatness in God's eyes isn't measured by perfection or the absence of flaws, but rather by the unwavering dedication of one's heart to God. David, despite his significant shortcomings, is remembered as a man after God's own heart because his heart remained consistently directed toward God. His imperfections did not negate his devotion. In conclusion, David's life is a rich and complex narrative that continues to captivate and inspire us millennia later. His journey, from humble shepherd to king of Israel, is a tapestry woven with triumphs and defeats, moments of extraordinary faith and heartbreaking human failures. This intricate narrative provides a powerful and nuanced portrait of a life lived in a dynamic, often tumultuous, relationship with God. His enduring legacy as a warrior king, poet, and man of faith continues to shape our understanding of leadership, worship, and the true meaning of a life dedicated to God's service. His story powerfully demonstrates that God can use imperfect individuals to accomplish his perfect purposes, and that true greatness lies not in the absence of flaws, but in the persistent willingness to turn to God in all circumstances, both triumphant and challenging. May we all, like David, strive to be people after God's own heart, trusting in his grace, humbly accepting his correction, and wholeheartedly dedicating our lives to his unwavering service. Let's continue together on this journey of discovering the wonders of God's Word. See you in the next video.